Okay, we're on now. Yeah? All right, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us on a Saturday. I know you are just coming from another session, so we're getting started a little bit late. We can run a little bit long, but still do need to wrap up pretty close to 1. So we'll try and keep it short and relatively informal with this group here. My name is Amanda Eichel. I am the executive director of an organization called the Global Covenant of Mayors. We're a representative of 9,000 cities globally, bring together global and local city networks. All of these cities have committed to take significant action on climate change. And importantly, they need new innovation, research, and technology in order to meet those commitments. So really excited to be having this conversation today with the group of panelists that we have. So quickly, on our panel today, we have Jim Snabe, who is the chairman of Siemens, Maersk, and also vice chairman Alliance, board of trustees at the World Economic Forum, and former CEO of SAP AG. Erich Clementi, senior vice president for IBM and chairman of IBM Europe. Anne Rosenberg, who leads SAP NextGen, a purpose-driven innovation university and community aligned with SAP's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Dr. Inhyok joins us as the head of Tech Insight Group, a CEO direct report department in SK Telecom. And Bo Øksnebjerg, did I get that close? Okay. Secretary General of WWF Denmark. So we're going to start with Jim, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview of the issue that we're here today to discuss, and then we'll have a conversation.
Well, thank you very much, and I was asked to give just a brief introduction to the topic at hand. First, I'd like to thank the people organizing P4G to add technology to the agenda. I've spent my entire career with technology, and I truly believe that we have a unique opportunity through technology to solve some of the fundamental problems on this planet. So in that sense, I'm actually an optimist. But I have to admit that I'm a concerned optimist. Concerned because that so far we've let kind of technology drive the direction of technology, and I think that's a mistake. If you let technology drive the direction, it basically means you get excited about the technology and then you look for a problem to solve. And the most prominent problem we've solved so far is to take beautified pictures of cappuccino cups and share them with friends on the internet. We've allowed companies to steal people's data and create massive monopolies on platforms. And that has turned into a situation where the opportunity on the technology has concentrated value on very few hands. And we've even allowed those companies not to pay much taxes. I think that's not a very intelligent way of using intelligent technology. And I truly believe that it's time that we become what I call purpose-driven in our approach to technology, not technology-driven. What does that mean? Well, I think there are 3 things we need to do that we haven't done enough of so far. First of all, we need to solve the right problem. So rather than getting excited about technology, we've got to figure out what problem are we trying to solve and then see how we can apply technology to solve those problems. Luckily, the SDGs give us 16 very relevant problems to solve, so we don't have to search for the problems. We just have to get our act together in trying to solve those problems and not the problem of the cappuccino. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with the World Economic Forum, and we did a study on how could value change dramatically change if you use current technology to its full potential. And that gave me optimism. I fundamentally believe that we can convert fossil fuel-based energy systems to sustainable energy systems at very affordable energy prices, if not for free. I think we can convert wasteful push-based supply chains into customer or consumer-driven supply chains based on circular economy principles, and with that have abundance of resource instead of current extreme waste. I think we can create opportunities for local entrepreneurs to connect to global markets and get transportation at very efficient ways so that we can create local opportunities and reduce the need for migration. I think we can create education that is more or less for free, that is individualized and for everyone, boys and girls. We can create individualized healthcare systems that are affordable for everyone. And most importantly, maybe we can invite 2 to 3 billion people into the innovation cycle, the global innovation cycle, if we team up in the right way. So that's the one problem that we need to address, the solving the right problem. Now, it's not only about innovation, and adding 2 to 3 billion people to the innovation process is, of course, a huge benefit. But I actually believe the biggest problem we have is not great ideas. There are so many good ideas out there. It is a question of scale. So how can we scale the best solutions to solve the 16 problems that we have identified? That requires partnership. In fact, the 17th SDG is about those partnerships. I represent large companies like Siemens and A.P. Møller-Mærsk, and we would love to collaborate with innovative startups so that we can marry the two parts, the greatness of the ideas that typically young people, startups with no legacy have, with the scale of large companies, and through that, get impact much faster. The third item I think we need to take much more care of is that we must make sure that this development that we create is for everyone. Digital platforms have a tendency to concentrate value on few hands and create kind of monopolies, and we have to counter that. Otherwise, the opportunity will not be for everyone. This requires policymakers to address, I think, 3 concerns that I have. How do we leverage data without losing privacy? How do we leverage platforms without creating monopolies? And how do we leverage artificial intelligence without losing control? These are some of the fundamental questions that we need a collaboration with the policy side on. Let me end by saying that I truly believe that we are lucky to be leaders in times of radical change with tremendous technology opportunity, but with that luck comes an enormous obligation, an obligation to solve the right problems, do it in a way that allows massive and rapid scale, and do it in a way that offers opportunity for everyone. And therefore, I'm excited to be here among innovators and leaders from various parts of society to see what we can do in action every day. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Jim. I think one of the interesting points there is around purpose-driven leadership, and this is something that Anne and I were talking about just before we got started. And I wonder if maybe we can start about the type of leadership that's required from both an academic, but also the perspective of bringing partners together, and the type of new leaders that we're going to need to train as part of the academic process.
So I think what we are seeing right now that we are getting new leaders, or existing leaders are changing. They become purpose-driven. And I think we can all agree on we haven't seen anything changing so rapidly as we see now, where presidents of the world, CEO of the world, the startup scene of the world are dedicated to work with the 17 global goals. And what this event is so really well done is really bring them together with the partnerships. So the company that I represent, SAP, which is the biggest enterprise software company in the world. So what does that mean? We are in 180 countries around the world, 35 industries, more than 4,000 companies run SAP. And the best way I can explain this is that 78% of all the food in the world is produced, transported within the SAP ecosystem, or 82% of all medical devices, just to give some example. And the fact that the leadership of SAP have decided in 2015 that we, as Jim mentioned, we are a technology platform, a platform who can go out with that huge ecosystem and enable companies, government, the society, academia, when they build solutions, that they need to think about not just efficiency and innovation and optimization, but think about what are we trying to do, what are we trying to achieve. So we are building this huge global innovation ecosystem, innovation with purpose, where we want people to come together and talk about how can we, because we all can contribute, together we can contribute, and we can I believe, maybe I'm naive, I believe we can reach the 17 global goals, we can only do it together. But it do take, to your point, it takes that you as a leader need to lead with purpose. It's a mindset, it needs to touch you, you need to be who you are, you need to identify you with it. And this is what we as SAP, we have decided to do, and this is what the entire companies are doing all over the world.
And a similar question, but maybe more from the perspective of how can information and data help us. So Dr. Cha, how do you think about this question of leadership and innovation from your company's perspective?
Sure. I believe that the leaders of large corporations have a specific requirement in this age to be data aware and also responsible with data. And Mr. Snabe was exactly right. I mean, the data power currently resides with a handful of companies. And there are also tens of thousands of other companies who want to take those kind of same positions, trying to become the next powerhouse, the centralized power. At the same time, there's prevalence of short-term thinking and drive for short-term profitability that have been shown by these early large success stories. So I think the responsibility for the leaders really is to expand their minds and also to really try to become more educated socially, more critically conscious, and for example, educated about P4G goals and SDGs, and find ways where they can contribute with the powers that reside with the data. So I think it has to start from the leadership, very top leadership, with specific senses of responsibility rather than just short-term opportunity-seeking behaviors.
And maybe, Erich, also from the perspective of data and how IBM approaches this, is it similar? Is it a different approach? How do you think about this?
Here's the way we think about it, and I'm very happy that Jim raised the issue. Technology can support the 17 goals, can enable the 17 goals, or I would be more aggressive and say, without technology, it's not going to work. Now, the technologies that are going to have to enable this are all centered around data. Because whether you talk about blockchain, whether you talk about AI, there is no AI without information architecture. So in the end, you need to get to data. What enterprises need, I would like to echo on, is clarity of purpose. Let's say we are the oldest technology company, so more than 100 years, because usually in our area, I mean, it's not so common that you get beyond teenage, okay? You get either swallowed or something happens. So we are still here because our purpose has never been to disintermediate our clients or anything else than helping clients and governments to make use of technology. Let me give you the example of what that means on data. On data, there are principles where we need to be very clear. The data is owned by the client or by the private person, period. You got to be clear about that. Second, the insights that you win from those data, the models, are also the ones of the committant. Now, let me contrast that with the consumer internet. So Tim Cook famously said, when something is free, the product is you, all right? So if somebody has a business model that hoovers up data, and then those data points are sold for advertising, it's very different from the advertising that you used to see many years ago, where you and I would see the same advert. Technology allows you to tailor, to create a reality for single people, so it becomes manipulation. So if we want progress here, we need companies that stick to ethical use of data, and it has to be declarative, okay? And regulation will come in, but regulation in technology is always second. If you regulate before the technology even exists, you're going to stifle innovation. So that's the first. And on artificial intelligence, it would do us a lot of good if we were realistic. First, artificial intelligence is here to augment the human. It is not here to substitute. I mean, we could dream up scenarios in 2100 something, but it is here to augment. Second, it needs to be transparent. In other words, if an algorithm determines an outcome, it needs to be transparent on which data and on which rule it has determined that outcome. Otherwise, you will lose trust in the system. Okay, and third, and I think it was already mentioned, it has to be inclusive. Because AI will change 100% of the jobs. It will not substitute 100%, but it will change. Okay, it will substitute few, and we already see some backlash against technology. So there's good tech and bad tech, or to use Jim's word, purposeful tech and leisure. All right.
Great, and maybe Bo, just to think about, how does WWF come to this? It's an interesting panel, and the perspective that you bring is somewhat different. So
yeah. So this is an extremely exciting time for us because now this conversion, you could say, of technology that can solve problems also in nature and how we relate to the natural resources we have, and this new purpose-driven style that a lot of companies have shows a lot of promise for the future. But I think when it comes to leadership, we also have to remember that a lot of the purpose-driven companies are linking their technology also to their business model. And this leaves out some of the challenges also of the 17 sustainable goals. So if you take, for example, life on land or life below water, a lot of reports have shown that almost no companies work with that. And if we do not have life, if we do not have the biodiversity, if we do not have clean water and so on, a lot of the technology, all the solutions that we have, they will never come into play because we have a big problem. So if we talk leadership, I think that we need leadership on the political side to make sure that all of these areas are covered. And we need also, you could say, some superheroes within the companies who are willing to take on challenges that perhaps not are easy to make money off afterwards. And then at the very end of this, we also need some financial leadership because I have participated in a lot of these discussions, and when we talk about artificial intelligence and so on, it's not a problem to get that financed. But a lot of the technological development that could solve some of these problems that I talked about before, they have big financing problems. So I would like to see a revolution in financing as well, because finance still follows, you could say, easy profit.
Jim, I think you wanted to jump in.
No, I think the point made on oceans is a good example of, most companies wouldn't necessarily put that on the top of their 3 SDGs that they mostly influence. I totally agree. And we had the discussion at A.P. Møller-Mærsk as an example. So we've had a policy not to pollute the oceans. We live from being able to transport, containers at sea. And so you could easily argue that, hey, this is not our problem. We didn't pollute it, so it's not our problem. Yet we felt that we are such a significant player using the oceans, even if we don't destroy them, if we don't have any negative impact on them, that we said, well, what if we could use what we can do? And so the CEO basically said, well, we transport 20% of world containers at sea. That means we have boats everywhere. We have connected boats everywhere. We could actually collect data about oceans in ways no other company could do. It wouldn't cost us a lot of money, but it would help us understand the problem, where it is, and find solutions to solve it. And recently we even invested in one of our vessels going out and trying to get some of the plastic out. Now that's not necessarily a sustainable model because it has to fit to your business model. But clearly collecting data from oceans is, I think, a responsibility we have, even if we didn't pollute it. Now we have to solve the problem from its root cause, and that is, of course, the access to plastic. And I think most of the plastic in the oceans come from 3 rivers in this world. So let's understand root causes and solve the problems fundamentally, but be responsible in our leadership.
So I mentioned to all of you ahead of the panel that the Global Covenant of Mayors recently released a research and innovation agenda co-developed by businesses and cities. And one of the key pieces in that agenda is the sort of call to companies globally and also to business, to government to make data and information available to cities in a way that they can use it. But I think, Jim, you just talked about one example, but how do we create the right incentives to make that data available to cities and in a way that they can actually use it to make decisions? And just open to the panel, anyone that wants to jump in here.
Maybe I can take a first stab on that.
Please.
So I'm working as a member of a Korean government's special committee on smart cities, and this question actually has been discussed at length within our efforts. We are trying to develop completely new cities as a model for future civilization in Korea, and possibly with multinational participation, collaboration also for the world. So the data, of course, is at the center of that effort. A lot of past efforts at collecting data centrally and somehow rewarding that behavior with very simple regulations have mostly failed. That was our observation. So instead, we're trying to find ways so that more bottom-up kind of approach can be tested. That's why we are looking at the world of the blockchain with a lot of focus, because the technology of blockchain, for those of you who may not know this, is a kind of a reincarnation of the first generation internet, where we have learned, for example, when the internet was first invented, there was a layer of communicating the bits, but also there was a layer for transferring values, so rewards for the exchange of the bits. But that layer kind of got disappeared. And the internet that we have is just about transferring the bits, and the business model became the ad-based model, right? But the blockchain, as it exists now, has a much more thicker protocol where the change of the bits and the change of the values are intertwined with the mechanism of cryptocurrencies, for example. So if it gives a natural incentivizing mechanism for the masses, for the participants, with data immutability and decentralized governance. So that's why we are looking at potential ways of using something like blockchain to massively kind of give a boost to the efforts of putting in the data and getting instant reward, instant and transparent reward as a mechanism. So.
Maybe I can add just a few comments. Sometimes it helps when technologists like me throw new words and buzzwords, and to just put it down to physical reality and just remind ourselves, how did we do that in the physical world? One example, could you imagine that a company would build roads in a country or a city and then say, you can only drive my cars on these roads? That would be impossible. There was a great video done in Denmark where the post service, so the national post service is not national anymore, but anyway, they were like, filming the post office where the manager in charge said, we've finally figured out how to make money. We're now opening everyone's letters. And then we can understand our customers much better and give them a better service. And you all laugh, because in the physical world, we would never accept that. And so sometimes that's what we need to do, is say, how would we do that in the physical world, and is that a reasonable way? We should not allow, let's say, the techies with fancy words that we don't understand to set rules that are unreasonable. 2 examples. At Siemens, you asked specifically about the cities. We are very engaged in trying to make smarter cities. I know IBM is as well. And so the reflection is, so can we solve all problems in one city? Autonomous vehicles and food and water and waste. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to come from one company. So what do? We have a platform called MindSphere. We open it up. We ensure interoperability with any other type of technology. And we collaborate with technology companies, with waste companies, what have you, to solve the real problems. At AP Møller, we have digitized the documents in trading. This is a very big problem. We've actually done it in collaboration with IBM, a joint partnership. that platform is blockchain, it's open, anyone can join. Why? Because then we can have sufficient increase of efficiency in global trade, which allows local companies to sell more efficiently to global markets, create value opportunity, schools locally, and less migration. And it's the only way, in my mind, to do this in a responsible way.
If I may, I actually like this analogy to the physical world. There are some things in networks particularly where a natural monopoly, they are natural monopolies because the highest value of a network is if everybody is connected. What did we do with our energy network? We regulated it, and we said, the energy network is regulated, but all the sales and the innovation on top is free. That's the way you create platforms. And this will be necessary, and it cannot be done by a company alone. It has to be done in public-private partnerships. Because you talk about smart cities. We have a center of competency for circular economy that we put in place a couple of years ago that looked at the emissions. Now, when we think about emissions and emissions control, it's mostly a discussion around decarbonization, energy, and transport. In reality, 50% of the CO2 emissions are also related to materials. And with urbanization going on, the way it is going on, the reuse of those materials is minimal. Unless we decouple the GDP growth from the use of virgin materials, there is no way to reach the goals. Now, what do you need to create a platform? You need a digital twin, so a digital image of buildings and what they contain. And then you need a digital marketplace that knows how to match supply and demand, that knows which kind of new construction comes out, which knows the refurbishment, and which matches it. And the incentive system that I believe in sustainable incentive systems. Jim said sending all of Maersk's 620 vessels out just to collect plastic is not going to be a sustainable solution. Nor is it just to give incentives. I think there are business models around this that can actually work, okay? Because instead of recycling, which means destroying, okay, you can remanufacture, refurbish, reuse. So, and it doesn't work without technology. And who should build such a platform? Frankly, we have solved issues again. I mean, your analogy is very powerful in the physical world. Is anybody confused about what a cataster is? You know the property rights. We have digitized the property rights. We know how to go and see the provenance of the property of a building. Why can't we do it with materials?
Yeah, so I'm so happy that you said that before, Jim, because I think also that is definitely the way forward. We need open, transparent platforms where we can share ideas. NGOs like others and many others, we can connect to the rural areas, to the poor who may not have a chance to go on these platforms, but they can have some kind of access. And I think also once we get into that sharing mode, some of the challenges with the ownership of data will end, simply because everyone is around the table when the decisions are made. So these open, transparent platforms, they are the future. And what we need now is you could say the time and the leadership to actually make them happen. Right now, it works on individual company scale, which is good, and we can have a lot of experiences. I think it's very brave that a lot of companies are doing this, but we need to take this to the next level.
So what is happening right now is actually there's nothing unexpected in it. If we kind of go 2 steps back. Mm-hmm. So for around 8 years ago, the magic 8 years ago, Silicon Valley was the place where, and this is why I call it Innovation 1.0. This is where, wow, you go to Silicon Valley, this is where you find innovation. And then we went into the Innovation 2.0, where we kind of figure out, innovation is not happening in Silicon Valley. There's actually innovation pockets all over the world. And people got crazy innovation. It's kind of funny if you look at the stats about how many startups were there for 8-10 years ago and how many are there today, right? It's kind of like totally crazy how many startups there are. But now Innovation 2.0 is not enough. It's not enough just to be an innovation hub. You need to, so what are we doing with this innovation? And this is where, and I don't think you guys might know this, but New York was not seen as innovation city. So I moved from Silicon Valley to New York for around 2 years ago, and where New York was forgotten around innovation, it was Chicago, Boston. But in 2 years, New York became the second biggest innovation city in the world because of UN. Because that's where we hit the Innovation 3.0, where you don't just do innovation, do innovation with purpose. And to do that, you need to do it in partnerships. You need to get academia in, and if you look at the academic network around the world, academia is just not an education institution anymore. They are that. But they're also a place where you go for research, you go to work with startups, you go to work for the minds of young people. And you might know UN are calling the next generation the SDG generation, because the mindset of young people is what we need, because working with purpose is a normality for them, right? But what is happening now is we go into Innovation 4.0. Innovation 4.0, let me ask the audience here, how many of you like science fiction? Okay, yeah. And honest, open, right? How many of you bring science fiction to work? How many of you go into a boardroom and say, I actually saw Blade Runner yesterday, and by the way, I think we should go in that direction. How many of you have ever done something like that? Okay, right. So the days is over. This is what we're going to do now going forward, because I'm working with a triangle where we say, you can do anything you want with technology today. It's not a question about limitation. You can do anything you want. What happened when you can do anything you want? You need to figure out what you're going to do, right? Do we think we have enough imagination? When I was 10 years old, I think I had more imagination when I was 10 years old than I have now. So how do I activate that? And that is where you become time traveler. You become time traveler where you go into 2050, 2030, and you think about how will the world look like? How do I want the world to look like? And you take responsibility. And then you use the 17 global goals to make sure you build a good world, because we don't want the Blade Runner recipe to be brought into the world. So this is a triangle, so you can do anything you want. You activate sci-fi in yourself. You all have it. I saw it right there. And then you use the 17 global goals to build those partnerships where you find like-minded people who have the same mission, because we all can contribute. And last thing I want to say, I spent my entire summer in Africa working for a startup. I was in Ghana, Joburg, and Cape Town. And we think we need to go to Africa to help and save Africa. No, they are leapfrogging us like crazy right now. They will tell us what the future will look like. And to Jim's point before, we have so many people, millions of people coming in because of the connectivity, they have access to contribute to the innovation. And for them doing innovation with purpose is a normality. It's not like in Europe when you say, do I do innovation today or do I do innovation with purpose? If you go to Africa, they just do innovation with purpose because they have a need for doing that. So we need to learn from, in this case, the continent of Africa.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point. You've all mentioned equity and inclusiveness in some way, and we talk about New York as being innovative, but the examples from Africa are really exciting and compelling. And Jim, you mentioned another from the continent. I wonder if you could share that experience.
Yeah, I think the SDGs are in that sense not new. The question is, how do we actually deliver on them? I think that's the key challenge. And P4G was about building action around partnerships. And I think the argument we're all making is that if you want to use technology with a purpose, you go for the problem and you count backwards, and you actually need multiple participants to solve the real problems. And by the way, it has to be global partnerships. So one example that illustrates how powerful that is a project that I knew from my active involvement with the World Economic Forum called Grow Africa. You should all go and look it up. It's a fact that we have enormous waste in food supply chains. Some would argue more than 70% waste. At the same time, we have children dying of obesity, not having access to good, nutritious food. This project was about combining, let's say, the most advanced technologies from the large corporations. Paul Pullman was here yesterday. Unilever is a huge partner in that project. Combine that with local entrepreneurs who can move things and really get things going in the local environment. You add to that some funding mechanisms and political frameworks that allow that project to actually continue. And the impact is quite astonishing. By now, I think they have educated more than 1.3 million farmers. The yield you get from the same farm is up to 10 times higher. And if you get 10 times or even 5 times more yield from the same field, you've fundamentally solved the food and nutrition problem in Africa. Not by donating money, but by combining the best we have in this world in efficient partnerships on the ground. This project or this setup is now being exported to Asia as well. And in each country it's different. So it's not like here's a bureaucracy with a lot of planning. It's a grassroots element combined with a framework that is actually very efficient in terms of bringing the best of what we have together. That is what I think P4G is all about, and that's why we need large companies, we need small entrepreneurs, we need politicians. We've seen tremendous politicians commit at this summit, and we need the good projects, and we shouldn't be afraid of technology. We should steer it so that it solves our problems, not our cappuccinos.
Dr. Chow, please.
My company, SK, is actually a part of a large conglomerate. You may not actually know some of that, but it's the second largest conglomerate group in Korea, $150 billion in sales and so on. So it's 60, 70 companies. What happened in the past few years was that from the leadership level, we have decided to put what we call a double bottom line, DBL, into our very fabric. So what that meant was that in addition to the traditional economic valuation, the maximization of the economic values, we've also, with the same weight, we put the second pillar, which we call the social value maximization. So now the companies, all of the constituent companies of SK Group are required to come up with the metrics and also to show the long-term plans to how to maximize the social values. And I think the reason I'm talking about this is because from large enterprises, sometimes this kind of top-down approaches to make it happen, and that will have an impact on thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, and multi-billion dollars of impact will start to take place. So that's probably one way that we need to do this. In terms of something else, I think one of the areas that we've seen where very innovative new experimentation took place was in agriculture and cattle farming. SK Telecom actually has laid out the world's first nationwide IoT network in Korea in 2016, so covering the entire country. But when we did that, we put one type of network that is very, very economical to build. And as a result, that used unlicensed technology instead of the spectrum auction technology. So as a result, we could provide very economical connectivity to small businesses and even individuals. Now, one of the businesses that took that up was an innovator in cattle farming, and their application was a small device that takes measurements of internal temperatures of cows, so that you could time the production the regeneration of the cattle, and as a result, you could drastically reduce the consumption of the food, the green food that cows actually will consume. So it's an indirect kind of consequence of giving the tools and platforms to people and small business owners, and then they'll be able to find new applications that will actually potentially have large impact socially and with SDG aspects. Just wanted to share with that.
Erich, can I ask if from the IBM perspective, how you approach this issue of inclusiveness and accessibility?
Well, so I said before, this diffusion of technology will only work if we get the population, if we solve a problem for the population. Now, I'm actually an optimist in this, because even if there is upheaval, and even if there is a kind of an initial fear of substitution or of disruption, I think the reality in the diffusion of these technologies is such that we need more skilled people. So there's a good aspect in this, that there's a lot of demand that needs to be satisfied fairly quickly. Even in the countries in which today you find some strain in the labor market and also some social strain because of migrations and immigration, the problem will be to skill up these people fairly quickly. Otherwise, the enterprises are going to be stalling. So, what to do? If we train people normally and we expect everybody to get to a doctorate, a PhD, or a 4-year college degree, we are going to miss the mark. We started an initiative already a couple of years ago in which we said, is this going to be blue collar that gets substituted and white collars? No, it's going to be a no collar kind of situation where we need to create vocation-driven training paths that allow people to get trained in technology. We started in a public-private partnership, by the way, in New York, PTech, Pathways to Technology. Today it's 110 schools, 500 enterprises, SAP among them, joined immediately, where we train people in something which would, in the American system, be comparable to high school plus 2 years of collegiate degree. And I tell you, the first 4 or 5 years, we simply said, we hire everybody that comes out of that training path. And this is one example, okay? Then the other example that we need to consider is, and I think Jim alluded to it already in the beginning, these technologies should allow training at cost levels that we have never seen. I mean, if you go on Udacity or on some of these platforms, the quality of that instruction is just phenomenal. Yes. So this is a question of diffusing it, supporting it, and it will do us two goods. It will supply the skill, it will offer a perspective, but it also is going to be taking away that tension that today sometimes workers, blue-collar workers, fear in this substitution. And I think we owe it to them. And when I say we, I don't mean necessarily the generic we. I think the enterprises and the public, because the alternative is a backlash that sets us back.
So I just want to add to this. So it's an interesting conversation because what do you educate for? You educate for the future. And it's a fact, at least it's prediction, maybe not a fact, it's a prediction that during the next 5 years, all applications, business to business, business consumer, will have a voice component to it. My question is, how many people out there in the world are today working on voice component application? Very few. We need to get going on that. Secondly, the universities, and Jim mentioned it, and you mentioned it also, are being totally reshaped, and they're totally aware of that all over the world. SAP, we have a network of 3,600 universities in 116 countries, and they are reshaping themselves now. So what we have done, first of all, we bring all our technology available for all universities. We have a huge amount of thousands of education tutorials and stuff we make available. And then we are opening up every single week for the last 18 months. I've been setting up innovation spaces at university campuses where it's about building solutions for the 17 global goals. The interesting thing was that often that can attract the males, the guys, to get into those spaces. So what we just did, as soon as there's a 3D printer, we know what happens, right? So what we did was that we are setting up girl lounges now. So globally, I'm responsible for UN Women for She Innovates, so to make sure that women get into the equation, right? So we're setting up girl lounges now and really making sure that they are getting in and getting the same education. Because to your point, the fact is that every single job today, no matter what it is, every single industry today, no matter what industry it is, there is a technology component to it. And it's not that we want just to focus on that, I'm going to be a code, I'm going to be a data science. No. All jobs, you need to have a basic understanding about what technology can do for you. Therefore, for me, it's just like learning how to write and read and do the math. Technology is a must-have to understand for you to go into the world that we want to shape for the future.
Bo, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what we are trying to do at WWF is to try to fill in all the spaces between all of these great things that the companies and nations worldwide are doing right now. So we have something we call Panda Labs, for example, where we actually decentralize the whole innovation system. We go out into the world, we talk to the farmers, to the young people who have a very low degree of education, and talk to them and bring those ideas back to the companies. And then on the other hand, we look at the 17 development goals and say, where can technology be applied? And then we go to the companies and say, we can use blockchain to trace commodities, tuna from its fishing. We can use artificial intelligence to find out if a fishing fleet is fishing legally or illegally. We can use spatial pattern analysis to see the health of a forest and so on. What I see is that the companies are really willing to work with the technology and with us where they have the chance, and often they're also willing to listen to the voices of those who are perhaps not completely on board on the technological revolution right now. And I hope that in the future that this will also be part of the discussion. So I noticed that Maersk have a lot of ships that are willing to take a test, and I have 10-15 ideas here I need to discuss with Jim afterward.
Very good.
Great, and I actually think on that note, we're going to have to hear some last comments from the panel, and maybe with the focus and in the spirit of P4G and the ideas that Bo has just identified, opportunities for potential partnership and where you see this industry in this space moving. We'll start with you, Dr. Cha.
Oh, okay, thank you. I think for participation to really flourish, you need to have some kind of a tangible medium that you can all kind of work on and work with. So it's probably a little bit self-serving, but since I'm representing the Korean efforts for smart cities, we're actually trying to make the smart city as a regulation eased zone. Regulation eased does not mean that it's going to be a wild, wild west. Rather, since there are going to be certain principles, socially aware principles that everybody has to abide by, but given that ethos, we would like to actually experiment a whole society in these cities, not just technologies or services, but how we structure ourselves, how we govern ourselves, how we work with other entities, and so on. So I think maybe somewhat constrained, but large enough space-time, such as cities, might be a good example as a platform for multipartite participation.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, I think we've lived through 3 revolutions of technology where they all had the same idea that you mass produce for lower cost of marginal cost, and that has kind of propelled progress, but also had an enormous bill. The bill in terms of enormous waste, pollution, exploration, uneven distribution of opportunity, etc. The fourth industrial revolution, and I discussed this with Klaus Schwab as well, whether we should call it something else, because it sounds like it's the next one of 3, so it's the same. I actually believe it's completely different. I prefer to call it the first digital revolution. It's different because it's not about mass, it's about individual. Individual have voice, individual have needs, individually can be delivered to individually, whether it's in healthcare, in manufacturing, and we can have an individual world. It doesn't come easy. And I think we have a situation right now where kind of a tipping point is happening, where technology is at a stage where there is no limitations from a technological point of view. We don't need future tech to solve current problems. We just need to apply current tech. At the same time, geopolitics is reversing for the first time since the end of the Cold War, where we begin to fight each other. And this gap between the technologically possible and the politically desired is going to potentially convert the fourth industrial revolution, the biggest opportunity we ever had, to just a plain revolution, because we don't take care of the irrelevant problems. So a purpose-driven technology choice, moving from, let's say, large entities, large countries, to networks of entities that work together around solving relevant problems, and making sure we do that in responsible ways where everyone get an opportunity, I think is something we should be inspired by. And I think the only way to get there is if we start articulating the future in a positive way. It is a much better future. And seeing more responsible leadership in trying to get us there, show the examples where it happens, accelerate those, and get out of the negative press that talks about disasters and replacing peoples and what have you. We got to have an optimistic point of view of the future and then calculate backwards on what do we need to do today in order to get there.
Thank you.
So if I look at the P4G for me, it has one of the things that I would take with me back to New York, which I think is really have blown my mind, because often when you work around the 17 global goals, you have kind of the great showcases with startup, and then you have a couple of panels where people are talking, and you kind of think, okay, when do that great idea actually come into a corporation and something is actually happening and you can scale it out, right? And we all know that by 2020, this is where you in Global Compact, we need to make sure that we begin to show some results. So I think this is what P4G have done in an amazing way, that you take those great startups. It's not a conversation about this was a cool startup. It's actually a conversation about the partnership between the startup and between the corporation. That is the key thing. So that is what I think will be the big focus of 2019, and I would even go so far as say I think P4G, in my world at least, is the front runners on this, and I hope to see that, now I'm sitting next to Jim so I can say that, I hope to see a lot of that at Davos with the World Economic Forum, that you really see the collaboration between the startup world and the corporations and the governments. And I would say I had the pleasure to host Lars Løkke and a number of the CEOs from Denmark in the week of the Global Compact. The event was called Denmark is a Small Country, but a great idea. I think we all think that based on being in the last 2 days. And I know I'm biased because I'm Danish, but I've been living abroad for many years. But I think what Lars Løkke have done and how he have orchestrated in a beautiful way this a commitment from the CEO of Denmark and the academic environment and the startup world of Denmark is something that I think is remarkable. And I know many countries are doing similar things, but I think there's definitely something to learn from that. And the fact that you all are here in Denmark for this event with P4G, and you also have fielded and seen, and you had the opportunity to get around Copenhagen yesterday is great. So I think for me, the big takeaway from P4G is really, instead of just have a startup world out there, social entrepreneurs out there, and you have the corporate world and government out here, this event here showed how do we get together. The next big thing we need to deal with is that it cannot be that we physically need to meet. We need to make it a normality, and that's where I have several meetings soon these 2 days about how can we actually make a platform, a meeting platform, like imagine you get a push notification. I'm working on this big ocean issue that Jim mentioned, and you get a push notification about some great ideations from a startup, different places around the world, coming to you where you can work with those ideas. So we need to make innovation with purpose and normality, and something which is easy. It's easy to find those ideas around the world from startups and academia. That's the next thing that we need to tackle and work on that platform. And I'm actually happy to be part of working on that. We're already working on it, but we need to do it in partnerships.
So, what do I take away from this P4G? So, for sure, living in the technology industry, we are focused on very much, we live in the now because we have a ton of opportunities. We have more opportunities than what we can reasonably follow. So that then sometimes needs focus. And now we get focused on two things. First, we have a problem that we cannot really push on to the next generation. Those are the 17 sustainability goals. I mean, we got to solve that. Nobody else will solve it for us. But then, just to take a quote that I liked here from Jim, concerned optimist. I'm actually optimistic because knowing that we can roll out, if we get pervasive with our technology and we point it at the right points, we actually have everything we need to solve the issue. Now, why is this issue so tricky? Because it needs coordination, and the coordination is the public-private partnership. And frankly, the worry of less collaboration than before between countries is a legitimate worry. Okay, we need an environment in which we can do that. But I believe in sustainability of business models. So you can make an effort, you can sustain an effort that isn't self-sustaining for some time. But then if it's just systemic, so if we get businesses that can actually make money, create value around the sustainability, then we have something that we can actually work with. That's for IBM. I mean, our former chairman used to say in '65, IBM will only do well if the society in which it operates does well. And I think that applies to every company. So we welcome public initiatives. We are willing to do what we have to do on it. And if we were not optimists as technologists, you cannot survive in that business if you are not optimistic, okay? And sometimes you are way above your skis, all right, and way out of your comfort zone. But that will be needed here because we have 15 years to solve the most salient issues.
I'm the NGO, so I should be the concerned one, and I think I'm the biggest optimist here. I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I can't remember a time when there's been this much agreement between the ones who take out natural resources and use them, and those of us who are dependent on them, and the politicians. It's a really, really incredible time, and I agree also with the companies here that we have the technology, we just have to apply it. So my dream for the future is actually that we go beyond the societies and people and take the whole planet into account. That's the next step we need to take. So we have the solutions to thrive and create welfare for people. Now we just need to include all of the natural world, and we will be in a really good place.
What a great way to end the panel. And I would just offer the Global Covenant of Mayors and all the cities that we work with would love to partner with all of you. But thank you so much to this panel. Thank you all for being with us on a Saturday. I'll see you soon.